if you want to like.
And I feel like a few more people might hop on, but we're going to go ahead and try to get started because we got a lot to get through. Excuse me, a lot to get through this evening. I'll give a quick few commercials. In your bag, we have the cast iron. I'm telling you, there's like 32 people already signed up for it. If you haven't signed up for it and you want to guarantee you get a little cast iron skillet, you better sign up quick. So call tomorrow. It's that flyers in your bag. Also put in there, sign up to be an extension homemaker. So this is some information. These classes fill up so quick, so I'm only marketing them through people that take cooking classes and extension homemakers. So you guys get the first options. And I'm excited. I have 10 people so far signed up for this class. I have a couple books left, but if you would like to join a 4-week series on doing life with your adult children, because adult parenting or parenting adult children is a lot different than parenting younger children. Lori, are you listening?
I'm listening. I'm right there with you.
Yeah, and might be something you'd be interested in. It's a really good book. It's a really good read. It is from a Christian author, but he has a lot of good points that I have learned a lot from, even with my children. And somewhere you have to give up being the mother hen and just be the mother and be supportive, even though you don't always agree. So I'm just going to put a plug in for that flyer you've seen around a couple different places. And I do have a couple books left. I am not going to talk much more. I'm going to monitor our chat like I usually do and watch you guys and see how you're keeping up. But I'm going to turn it over to Lori. Lori, in just a second, I'm going to mute everybody, but you're going to have to unmute yourself. Okay?
I'm here.
Because if I mute everybody, somehow I think I can mute everybody. I don't know where that went now. Maybe I can't because I'm recording. Oh, I really thought I could. Yes.
Do you want Joy to mute everyone?
No, I got it. I'm going to mute all. I'm going to let Lori unmute herself. If you have questions, unmute yourself and then mute yourself back or put it in the chat. That way we don't get any of the background noise and we can keep up with what Lori's trying to walk us through and teach us. Okay? So Lori, you have to unmute yourself. There you go. And I'm turning it over to you. You can introduce yourself and start walking us through what we need to do tonight.
All right. Hi, guys. My name is Lori Himmelsbach, and I am the owner and chef and baker at the Kentucky Millstone in Butler, Kentucky. So if you haven't been in yet, we bought the old Nellie's building, completely gutted and rehabbed it, and made a huge kitchen in the back because I need a lot of space. So that's where I'm actually working from today, is the baker's kitchen at our restaurant. This is the hot cross buns class, just to make sure that you're not supposed to be like in a mechanics class or something else. So we're in the hot cross buns class today, and we're going to talk a lot about a lot of different things. So while I walk you through how to make the hot cross buns, we'll discuss a lot of different things as well. And then as you have questions, if you can either write them in the chat box or like Kenna said, you can unmute yourself and ask the question. If you're able to put it in the chat box, that probably works out better because I tend to talk a lot. And so that'll give us the opportunity when I take a breath to actually answer your questions. We're going to actually go ahead and get started. And then that way, while the yeast is proofing and while the bread is rising and things like that, we'll have the opportunity to discuss some different things. My videographer for tonight is my daughter, Joy. So she says hello, and she's going to kind of walk you through some things as well. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take a look at my my little arrangement over here. And this is all of the things that we're going to use tonight. So just to give you an idea of what you're going to need, if you haven't gathered it, this is going to give you the opportunity to go ahead and gather those things. So we're going to use a sifter with a bowl. We're going to have our butter, and you can either melt that in your microwave in a bowl, or I'm going to do mine in a little pot on the stove. We've got some cinnamon, a whisk, some measuring spoons, sugar. We've got a 1 cup measuring cup and a 1/3 cup measuring cup. We have a liquid measuring cup. We've got our yeast. You guys should have had 2 packets of yeast that Kenna gave you. Because we're here in the bakery, you can see how much yeast I use, so I buy it in bulk. We've got some nonstick spray for our pan. We've got our eggs. Some scissors or a knife to snip the cross in your bun. I've got a fork. This is a dough scraper. So if you happen to have one of these, grab it and I'll teach you how to use it. If you don't need it, but it's a really cool tool to have. So we're going to talk about that. And then you should also have the currants that Kenna gave you as well. And then a couple bowls, some salt, and then your recipe. It helps to have the recipe on hand. And then you've also got your pan to put your hot cross buns in. So that's just kind of an overview of everything that we're going to use today.
And Lori, they got raisins instead of currants, but the same.
And that is actually awesome because we were going to talk about the substitutions that you can make. So I actually made some last night and I put dried cranberries in them because I love dried cranberries. And so we'll talk about that too as we get into that part. So we're just going to go ahead and jump in. And then if you have any questions, like I said, shoot them on the chat and we'll get them answered. So the first thing you're going to do in your recipe is it says combine 1.5 cups of flour, cinnamon, and currants. So we've got our sifter here, and then I've got my flour here underneath. I have a huge tub of flour. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to go ahead and pre-sift that flour so that it, if you have any clumps or if you haven't used your flour in a while or things like that, this will make your flour all soft and clump free. And some of you guys are baking right here along with me. So we're going to go kind of slow so that you guys can do the same thing as well. And I actually got this sifter on Amazon. It's a nice big heavy duty sifter. The one I have at home is actually my grandmother's sifter, and it has a little hole in the bottom of it. And it's very well used and loved. But if you have a sifter, that's good. If you don't have a sifter, you can always use like a wire mesh and kind of shake it through that. Or worst case, if you have no sifter at all, you can get your hands in there and get the clumps out if you have them. So we're gonna measure our flour. And this is called the dip scoop method. I tend to use a scale. So there's a difference between measuring your flour with a scale, which is by weight, or by volume, which is your measuring cups. And the biggest reason that I love to use the scale, there's a couple of reasons, but one is that it's very straight across the board. And so everything in the bakery is done on grams. And if you want the recipe, based on grams and things like that, I can get it to Kenna and you can have it. The reason I like it is because it's much more streamlined because it's always the same. And so, if you have someone that's never baked before and they think that they measure flour by just scooping like this, you've got a lot of flour in there. And then they, pack it down, they press the flour down in there. This isn't really the right method to do because it's going to make it a lot more dense. So the scale actually keeps, avoids from doing that because, 100 grams is 100 grams is 100 grams. Where if you're using your measuring cup, you may not always get the same amount. So for the dip scoop method, we're going to actually just kind of like scoop our flour in here. And then we're going to take our knife, which I have to grab. Do I have a knife? All right, we've got a knife here. And then you just level it off. So you got a nice even 1 cup of flour. So we're going to put that in our bowl here. And then I have to get my 1/2 cup measure. So we've got so I have my glasses. So we got our 1/2 cup here. And we're gonna go ahead and scoop some flour into that. Level it off. All right, so you've got 1.5 cups of flour in your sifter. Now we're gonna measure out our cinnamon. And just like everything else in my bakery, I've got lots of bulk items that I use, so they're all labeled. So we want 3/4 teaspoon. So we're gonna use 1/2 teaspoon. And same thing, I'm gonna use my lid to just kind of like even it off so you've got a nice even 1/2 teaspoon. And then we've got a 1/4 teaspoon. That's our 3/4 teaspoon. And then I'm actually going to throw a little bit of nutmeg in mine because traditionally nutmeg was used in hot cross buns. I didn't include it in your recipe because sometimes it's difficult to find and people don't have nutmeg grinders. And you can really use whatever spices you want to in this. Traditionally, it would have been nutmeg and cinnamon. I love cardamom, so I would put cardamom in it as well. But we're just going to use a little nutmeg today. Got a nice little nutmeg grinder here, and we just kind of have a little bit of that falling in there. So this is your nutmeg here, your nutmeg grinder. And so we have our spices and our flour, and then we're going to sift it. And I always seem to have to tap the side of my sifter just because it doesn't always seem to go through so well. And then we're gonna set our sifter aside and we're gonna take our raisins or currants or candied fruit, apricots. You get really brave with some chocolate chips in there if you like chocolate chips. So, you know, this is kind of where the recipe development is on your choice as to what you want to put in there. But traditionally, they would have used currants. So we're going to use 2/3 a cup. So I've got 1/3. Two-thirds.
Someone says, did she say cardamom is also yummy along with nutmeg? And yay for cranberries. I'm going to try that too.
Yeah, so the question was cardamom along with nutmeg. Probably I wouldn't use the two together just because they're kind of conflicting spices. And then the cranberries are awesome. A real quick way to figure out what you want to add to it. I love this book. It's called the Flavor Bible. And basically in it, it will tell you everything, maybe not so much spices, but if we go to cardamom, let's see if cardamom and nutmeg actually do go together. So, but this is an awesome book. You can find it on Amazon as well, or in your local bookstore. Okay, so here we have cardamom. And it tells you what the taste is. It tells you the function of it. Its volume is loud. That means it's an aggressive spice. So we're going down here and we're looking for nutmeg. And it tells you all the things that cardamom goes well with. It goes well with dates. It goes well with coffee and coriander. But nutmeg is not listed. So it kind of has a little bit of a hint that maybe nutmeg and cardamom are a little bit conflicting spices because they're both very aggressive. But this is an awesome book. I use it across the board for all cooking, just to give me a lot of ideas of recipe development and flavor profiles and just really amazing ways to pair things. And it's just a great jumping board, you know, if you want to be a better cook. So I definitely would suggest this book. All right.
I think I had several people say, I'm not even going to put raisins in it. I don't like raisins in my I'm like,
yeah, and that's not a problem at all. If you do not want to put raisins in there, leave them out. You can add something else if you want, like we talked about cranberries. But, you know, the goal of, you know, making the food for yourself is that you have to be able to, you have to eat it. So, you know, definitely, if you don't like raisins in there, leave raisins out by all means. So the cool thing about putting this in and weighing it out in the beginning or measuring out in the beginning is because oftentimes when you have those raisins or cranberries or currants or whatever, they all tend to clump together. And so what I'm doing here is I'm tossing them with the flour so that they're well coated, so that when we go to mix them into our batter or our dough, then they'll all be coated and they'll all be separate instead of getting these huge clumps of raisins like you might get. So we're going to set this aside. And then the next part is we're going to proof our yeast in warm water. So what we mean by warm water, I have my temperature gauge here, my thermometer. I love my thermometer as well. This is a digital thermometer that'll tell you, you know, the temperature of what you're doing. So we're actually going to go ahead and measure out our water. And we're going for a fourth a cup of water. And I'm just going to put this in the microwave for probably 20 seconds. It's not going to take very long at all. We're going with the 15 that's on there. And then we're going to test it when it comes out and make sure that it feels like it's tepid. So we want it to be just warm. If you stick your finger in it and it's hot, you definitely don't want to use it. I think that this is one of the major frustrations that people that use yeast will find, is that the water was too warm and they killed the yeast. So this is super important to make sure that it's the correct temperature. And I put my finger in and it feels like it's probably like 85. It's not particularly warm, but no, we're at 105. So that's nice. We want to go somewhere between like 85 and 110. And then if you want, you can put just a pinch of sugar in there. You don't have to, but I like to put just a pinch of sugar in there because it feeds the yeast. So now you're going to take those 2 packages of yeast that Kenna gave you. And because I do not have packages of yeast.
Says no, okay, this yeast says no water needed.
It does say that. So what you're working with then would be instant yeast, which is the same thing that I'm using. But like just when I put the sugar in the water, we are actually jump starting the hydration of the yeast. So you can add instant yeast directly to flour, but I do find that proofing the yeast will give it a jump start and a head start. What happens sometimes is if you had added cold liquid to it and it had it all mixed up together, it would kind of insulate that yeast and not allow it to grow. And so that is another thing that you do have to be cautious of, is if you're using an instant yeast, you want to make sure that all of your ingredients are warm enough to make that yeast rise. Otherwise, what will happen is it will just kind of like sit there and not really do anything. So we're gonna proof the yeast. We're gonna add it to water. But again, if you don't want to do that and you want to skip that step, then it definitely is possible to just go ahead and throw it into our flour when we add our flour in. So
did you say both packets? I'm sorry.
Yep, we're gonna use 2 packages.
Okay.
And so for those that do a lot of baking and they buy the yeast in bulk, 1 package of yeast is equal to 2 1/4 teaspoons of yeast. So I'm gonna go ahead and measure my yeast out. And we're just sprinkling it on the top of the water to start. So I'm getting 4 1/2 teaspoons of yeast here. And it looks like a lot of yeast. But that's okay, because we want them to rise. We don't want them to be dense hockey pucks. All right, so we got our 2 packages of yeast in there. And then I like to take a fork and just give it a little stir. And it's going to be a little clumpy, and it's going to be, you can get down inside there. It's going to look about like this. It's going to be kind of clumpy. But we're actually going to let it sit here. And that's the cool part, is we're doing it right now. So we're just going to let it sit there, and it's going to just do its thing while we measure everything else. So we're going to come back to that later. So
Everybody's still up with her. I can't, everybody's cameras are not on, but I want to make sure everybody's okay.
Excuse me, did you specify what kind of flour, self-rising or regular?
I did not. So this is going to actually be, it's actually going to be all-purpose flour. I am using bread flour just because at the bakery to have like 5 different kinds of flour doesn't really work for me. And so there are a couple of reasons why I teach with bread flour when the recipes call for all-purpose flour, is that I want to show you that it is possible to get a high-quality product using the bread flour as well. But if I were at home, I would use the all-purpose flour. It's going to make it a little more cakey. Bread flour tends to have a lot more gluten development. And so, it's going to be just a touch tougher. But I think, that's going to be a more refined palate is going to notice those things. So in the instance of, pretty much everything I use here is with bread flour. But at home, I would use the all-purpose flour for it.
Is it true that on a general, like a rule of thumb, if it doesn't specify self-rising, that it is all-purpose?
Definitely, because the self-rising flour actually contains the baking powder or baking soda or a leavening agent. And so the self-rising flour, it will pretty much strictly tell you if to use self-rising flour, and it'll leave those leavening agents out. So, you know, in a pinch, if you were at home and you were making biscuits and you didn't have any regular flour, baking powder, baking soda, you know, in that instance, you would use it. In this instance, we're using yeast as our leavening agent instead of baking powder and baking soda. So you definitely would not want to use self-rising flour in this recipe.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So our next part of our recipe, while our yeast is proofing, is we're going to combine our milk, butter, sugar, and salt in a large bowl. And it does say in the ingredients you want melted butter. And so you want to go ahead and melt that butter if you haven't already. And I actually, because I buy everything in bulk again, I'm going to have to weigh my butter out. So a half a cup of butter is the same as 113 grams or 1 stick or 4 ounces. And the reason I'm melting this now is because I'm going to gather the rest of my ingredients. And so while I'm gathering those ingredients, my butter is going to be melting.
Guys, I'll just tell you really quick and I'll show you my food scale. You can buy food scales very cheap or for very reasonable on like Amazon and stuff, just like the digital thermometer that she had. And those are definitely, in my opinion, if you do a lot of baking, if you do any kind of cooking, even if you're on a diet and you want to know exactly how much you're eating, these are very handy to have in your kitchen.
And I absolutely love, love, love my scales. This one I think is it's I think an OXO brand. I also, when I teach classes here, I have a smaller version of it that I believe is an OXO brand as well. But Amazon, I think they're under like $40 each.
Yeah.
But I use it all the time. And again, I can't emphasize, like, if you want to be a better baker, to be able to you know, weigh the same things again and again. And the other part, a really cool part, is that if I were baking this for the bakery, I would dump my milk in, I would dump my butter in, and like I would continue to hit 0 on the scale, so it tears it out. But I don't have to wash as many dishes, which I think is awesome. All right, so we're going to combine our milk, butter, sugar, and salt in a large bowl. So I have my butter melting. Our milk is a half a cup. So when you measure liquid, you want to use, first of all, you want to use a liquid measuring cup. A couple of really important things my mother taught me when we used to bake as kids. This is a liquid measuring cup. This is a dry measuring cup. And the reason you want to use the liquid measuring cup is because if you pour your milk in here, you got to get it right to the very tip top. And even then, you know, it's just not, it just doesn't work as well. And again, if you try to weigh a dry flour, a half a cup of flour in this, you know, again, that's not going to work as well either. So liquid measuring cup, dry measuring cup. And so then when you measure that milk, you're going to want to get down on eye level with it and make sure you see exactly where it goes. So we're looking for a half a cup. So here's our half a cup there. So we're going to put our half a cup of milk in. And if you were putting your instant yeast in the flour mixture, you would want to make sure your milk was a little bit warm. We're still working on our butter melting there. And then we have 1/3 cup of sugar. So sugar we've got here. And so if I were using my scale, then I would just, you know, weigh out exactly how much I needed. And just, you know, you don't have to have a measuring cup for it, so that's nice. And then 3/4 teaspoon of salt. And this recipe actually can be easily doubled. So you could double the recipe and then make 2 sets of them at the same time. So we've got our salt here. So we're going to do 3/4 teaspoon of salt. And then we're going to check on our butter again. I have a spatula. So it's getting there. And you could definitely go ahead and put that butter in the microwave as well. So we're going to give that a good stir. And then make sure you've got your eggs ready too. So what you can do now while you're waiting on that butter to melt too is go ahead and crack those eggs, because we're going to give them a good little whisk before we add them in. So to crack the egg, instead of going on a sharp surface here, we're going to go on a flat surface. And then if you notice how absolutely beautiful that egg is, we get our eggs from Faith Acres Farm. That's what we use here at the bakery. So we support our local farmers because they raise things conscientiously, and Jeff lets his little chickens run around all over the place. And they're just really well cared for chickens, and we love their eggs. So we're gonna put 3 eggs in here. And then if you take a look at our butter, it's mostly melted, and you see that little piece that's still in there, and it's gonna melt on its own. And by not melting it completely, this is gonna avoid like where you start to get the separation of those milk solids. And then if we take that and we add that to our cold milk and our sugar and salt, it's actually gonna kind of equalize the temperature and make it all nice and warm for the yeast. So, you know, you start with the cold milk and then you have the cold eggs. By adding that warm butter to it, it's gonna make everything about the same temperature, nice and warm. And then I'm gonna use the fork that was in with my yeast. So if we take a look at the yeast, it's all poofy now and all hydrated. And this is a really good way to see, you know, if you don't bake a whole lot and you're not sure whether your yeast is viable, if you go ahead and try and set it in some warm water and it grows, then you're like, oh, okay, we can use that. So we're gonna whisk our eggs up just a little bit, because I find that if we don't whisk them before we add it to this mixture, then you're gonna get like spots of yolk and spots of white. And so just have it go ahead and mix all that up. Works out better. So our recipe says, be sure to cool to lukewarm. So I'm touching it, it feels awesome. And then we're gonna whisk in our eggs. So I'm gonna dump those eggs in there. And then we've got our whisk. If you don't have a whisk, you can definitely use that fork that we used a little earlier. All right, so we whisk those in. And then we're gonna add, so it says be sure to cool, whisk in the eggs and then the yeast. So I'm following along in the recipe with you guys just to make sure we're all on the same page. And hopefully everybody is keeping up with me, those of you that are baking along. And so then we're gonna whisk in our yeast. And here at the bakery, we keep these little sheets of parchment. So, you know, if you like to be a clean baker, we like to have little pieces of parchment that we can use, and then that way we can set our dirty tools on there, and that way we're not constantly wiping off our countertop. So now we're gonna stir in 2 cups of flour into this mixture. So we've already sifted it. And so again, we can do our scoop level method, or if you have a scale, you know what the weight on that is, and you could weigh it out. Oh, that's actually 3/4 cup. All right, we're gonna try this again with a 1 cup measuring cup.
How many cups did you say, Lori?
So in this particular right now, we're gonna add 2 cups because it makes it really easy to stir. So if you remember before, we weighed out 1.5 cups. So our total right now is up to 3.5 cups. We just haven't added the other yet. So we've got 2 cups in here. And then
Lori, are you adding the flour? You put the raisins in or
not
the
yet,
other flour?
no, this is just the 2 other cups of flour. And the reason we're doing this now and not adding the raisins and the spices is because we're gonna give this a really good stir. And so it does a couple of things. One, it's gonna like start, mixing it all together. But the other thing is we're not gonna actually knead this dough, which, is good for those of us that are getting a little older and, tired of kneading. I knead a lot here at the bakery. And so any chance to not knead is a bonus in my book. But what we're doing here is we're actually activating that gluten by adding the flour slowly and stirring it in. So if you wanted to, you could probably even use a hand mixer to do this part. But what we're trying to do is just get it smooth. And it smells awesome. If you guys smell it, it smells so good.
I love the smell. Of
And we haven't even had the cinnamon yet, so it really smells good. All right, so when you've got it all smooth, then we're gonna take that other 1.5 cups of flour with the raisins or no raisins and the cinnamon, dump it in. And then give it a good stir and get it totally incorporated.
I liked your thought of adding chocolate chips.
Oh, yeah.
Just saying.
Yes, and you can get very creative with it.
I added some.
There you go.
Oh, you added some chocolate chips to it?
You can bring yours in and let me taste.
Oh, okay, I will.
Now, one of the things I like to do as a baker is I love to keep my bowl kind of clean. So if you take a look at that bowl, it's pretty clean down. I'll often take times, I have like a curved spatula. I'll take the opposite side and kind of like scoop it around, and it makes it like just cleaner. So you notice that this is still a pretty sticky dough. So then we're gonna add that last half cup of flour. So by adding the flour in increments and stirring it in, it's activating that gluten without having us have to physically knead it. It does get a little tricky to stir it at the very end. So I'll warn you, it's a little harder to stir. So we're gonna take that last half cup of flour. And I did actually, I mean, it's a little difficult to stir. So I did try throwing this down on the workbench and kneading it, and it didn't work. So I will warn you, and I will save you the cleanup, that it's still a sticky dough. So you kind of want to just cut that flour in there. And the goal is really just to get that flour incorporated in there.
Using those wrist muscles.
Yes. And if you wanted to, I mean, you could get your hands in there, but it is a sticky dough. So what we're looking to do is get it all mixed up so you don't see any streaks of flour in there. You really want to make sure you're looking down there at the bottom of the bowl and make sure there's no flour there on the bottom of the bowl. So this is really good time to get those young apprentice bakers that are working with you to do some of the work.
There's a few of them cooking today with them.
Yeah, so this is a good task for them. All right, so this is what we're hoping it will look like. We're gonna clean our bowl up real good here. So you see there's no white left in there. Looks like a nice homogeneous dough. All right, so you have a couple choices. I don't like doing dishes. So I'm gonna actually use the same bowl. My mother would not be happy with me, but that's okay. So what we're gonna do is we're actually gonna, if you want, either a different bowl or the same bowl. Oh, sorry. And I'm just gonna spray a little nonstick spray there. And then I'm gonna move this over to that side. And so if you wanted to use a separate bowl and do more dishes, then you just would put it in a separate bowl. Spray it first.
I don't know if Tony Hess is on here or not, Lori, because I can't tell, but Tony could tell you I'm a lazy cook. I'm the same. Fewer dishes.
Yes, well,
No.
we do a lot of dishes, and so we're trying to avoid that. But the goal with the nonstick spray is to keep it from sticking as it grows, and then once it does double, it'll make it easier to pour out into shape. So this is what your finished dough is going to look like. So in the chat box, if it doesn't look like this, get on the chat box now and let Kenna know, and we can figure out what happened. But if it does look like this, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and cover it up. So you can use another bowl. So you can go like this, cover it up with a bowl if you want it, the one that you had your flour in. I like to use plastic wrap just because it's, you know, quicker and a little bit cleaner. And I can go ahead and get a jump start on those dishes too. And then we're going to find a warm spot to put it in. So I am going to put mine in what I have is a proofing box. Hear the engine running there. And you look down here, it's 100 degrees. Okay, and I'm gonna take a quick drink and then I'll tell you at home how you can find a warm spot to put it in. So give me 1 second.
All right. Is everybody caught up to where she's at? Everybody has their bowl being covered, ready to stick it in a warm spot? Trying to watch those that I can see and a few I can't.
Not yet.
I'm still working.
All right, we'll give you a few minutes. Well, not.
All right, while some of you are finishing getting ready, we're gonna discuss where you can find warm spots in your house. So at home, what I'll typically do is I have 2 ovens, double ovens. And so I'll turn my bottom oven on to 100 or 200 degrees and I'll set my timer for 1 minute. And I will let it heat up for just 1 minute and then I'll leave the light on. I'll stick my hand in the oven and feel it and just see if it feels warmish. And that's what you're looking for, is just kind of that warm temperature. A couple of the other different options for you is if you have a big cooler at home, you can put some warm water down in there, like actually warm or hot water down in a bucket, and then set your dough next to it. And that will keep it in a nice warm spot. A lot of times, you might have a space heater that you could put it by. Anybody else in the group have a suggestion on what their favorite place is to raise dough or to have a warm spot for things? I think I've heard people also using an Instapot. I have not personally done that, but I do think there is a proofing in the Instapot as well.
I think it depends on the number of functions you have in your Instapot, so it could work. I feel like
I think I proof one.
Yeah, the oven method is probably about the best that most people would have.
With the heater.
I do mine on top of the refrigerator. It's always warmer up by the ceiling, and that's been working well with the sourdough.
That's true too. Good thought.
All right, so hopefully everybody has found a warm spot, and this is going to take probably a half an hour to 45 minutes to raise. I did a batch last night because I was wanting to test it and have some baked for the day. And it did take a half an hour in that warm oven. So we're going to give this one about a half an hour. In that time, we're actually going to talk about a few different things, but we're going to mix up the icing as well. So far, any questions anyone has? All right, we're doing good.
Lori, somebody said their oven has a proof setting on it.
That's awesome.
The oven.
Yeah, there's proofing drawers as well too, where you can put it in a drawer. So that's awesome. That's a great function to have.
All right. I need to make sure everybody's to the point where they're letting it get somewhere to start proofing. Is most people there?
I'm a little behind. I need to know how to put it in the oven to proof it again, or
Proof it again?
I'm gonna try it in the oven.
Yeah, so typically what I'll do is I'll turn my oven on to 100 or 200. My oven actually won't set to 100, so I turn it on to 200. And then I don't have the dough in there at the time. And then I'll set the timer for 1 minute because otherwise I'll forget to turn it off. So I set my timer for 1 minute and then I'll turn the oven off and I'll reach my hand in there and make sure it feels warm enough. And if it doesn't feel warm, then I'll give it another minute and then make sure your oven is off. That's the most important part. Turn the light on and then you can put it in your oven to proof.
Okay, thank you.
But the most important part is make sure your oven is actually off, because I've forgotten before. All right, so what we're gonna do while some people are finishing up is we're actually gonna go through the recipe and we're gonna talk about the ingredients. We're gonna discuss what types of ingredients you can use. So the first one on your ingredients is flour. We did discuss using all-purpose flour at home. I'm using bread flour and you'll see that it still works. If you wanted to, you could use a little bit of whole wheat in it. I'm gonna show you my wheat. So this is the freshly milled wheat we use here at the bakery. And then this is the white flour. So if you look at the difference, this one's just got a lot more nutritional value to it. So all of the quick baked items that we make here at the cafe, so our muffins, our scones, all of our cookies, our brownies, everything is actually made with this wheat. So the cool part is we're supporting our local farmers. It tastes better, it's healthier. The reason I'm not using it in our hot cross bun recipe is because there are some things that just, it doesn't translate as well. So it is a heavier flour. It hides well in cookies and brownies. It doesn't hide so well in a hot cross bun, which people are used to eating like as a more light white bun. So like you wouldn't want to use this in a hamburger bun. So it's the same kind of ideas. That's why we're using this particular flour. So if we talk about flour, if you wanted to, you know, throw a little bit of this in, I would maybe do 1 cup of this flour and then 3 cups of the white flour. So you still want to have a good ratio of white flour in that mix. So cool description here of the flours. Another interesting point is that we're actually going to we purchased a grain mill, and we're actually going to bring it on site to our cafe. We're trying to source local Pendleton County wheat. So the goal is to actually have local Pendleton County wheat grown here and milled here and baked here. So we're super excited about that. So if you know of anybody that farms really good wheat, send them my way.
Hey, Lori, there was a question in the chat that says, do you think you could use a cup of coconut flour or almond flour? And then 3 cups of the all-purpose.
I definitely would give it a try. I mean, I am totally game for testing recipes out. And that's like my passion, is the recipe testing. So when you come to the cafe, you're going to taste some really crazy stuff because we're always just seeing what works well together. As you know, we talked about the flavor Bible, the book. We just like to see what flavors pair well together. The reason I do think that coconut flour would work in it is because you're not really looking for that gluten development in this particular recipe. You're looking for a little bit of gluten to hold those buns together, but I definitely think that 1 cup would work. And then if you know you really want to use that ingredient, we would push it to 2 cups the next time. Joy, my daughter who's filming us, she actually is gluten-free for a really long time. So we do a lot of gluten, you know, we test a lot of gluten-free things so that, you know, she can enjoy them. So we love, if you want to take a picture of the flour we use here. So this is our gluten-free flour. And, you know, we just kind of like throw gluten-free flour at things and see if it works. So in this particular one, we would just substitute that particular flour, 4 cups of it, the same recipe, and we would see if it works. We haven't tried it yet on this particular recipe, but we do a lot of substitution with the gluten-free flour just for her to try. So I hope that answers your question. I can't guarantee that it'll work, but I would definitely give it a try.
This is Donna. Just to have my pan ready, can you tell me what size pan we want to bake these in?
It's gonna be a 9 by 13 pan.
Okay, do I butter it?
Definitely. You can either butter it or you can use the nonstick spray. This is the one I'm going to use today.
Okay.
The one that I baked in the other day was like a brownie pan. It was a metal one. So you can use whichever kind you want, but you can actually even use 2 9-inch square pans.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yep.
So we're kind of discussing all these things while our dough is rising. So, you know, again, if you have any questions as we go forward, we do have a little time while it's rising.
Laura,
So yeah.
when you get a break, I can give them some fun facts and see what they know about hot cross buns.
Awesome. Well, you do that so my voice can rest for a minute.
Okay, how about that? So and you can turn your microphones on if you know. Does anybody know why hot cross buns is kind of a Good Friday tradition, or any history behind the hot cross buns? Any guessers? Anybody have any thoughts?
Isn't it from where they were breaking their fast on Friday?
When I was investigating some, I saw a lot of different things. It definitely has been around for a very, very long time. Like we're talking back to the early 13th century, maybe even a little before that in some things. And there's a bunch of different theories out there. So they have been around for a while. Traditionally, the hot cross buns are just like the way Lori's showing us to make them. And they were usually sold, or people would tend to have them as a tradition for Good Friday. That on the top of them, when she shows you how to do the icing and how we're going to do it, it's going to resemble the cross on the top. It says some of the things I looked up said that it started with the monks and they used to bake them, and because they were baking them, they gained popularity over Easter because of the cross on the top of them. There was a time, like in the 16th century, that Queen Elizabeth kind of banned them from being sold, or tried to, because there were a lot of superstitions about it. And there were some people that even thought that they had some medicinal or magical properties to them. And so they became a little fearful of that. And that's when a lot of people started baking them on their own. Those are some of the quick things that I found on them, but I was curious if anybody else had anything. The yeast hot cross buns tended to be very popular during the holidays, or even people would take them to funerals. Anybody else have anything they ever saw or knew about them? We sing a song about them. Anybody know the song?
Buns,
Recorder.
1 a penny, 2 a penny, hot cross.
The hot cross buns. Yeah, I know. Every time I said hot cross buns to anybody in my family, they're singing hot cross buns, hot cross buns. I'm like, okay. I don't think that song really had a whole lot to do with them. There was one theory out there that they first were made, and because they were easy to make and they kept well, that they passed them out to the poor on Good Friday. So that was just some quick investigating I did on what hot cross, but they very much are, to some, a traditional Good Friday / Easter type recipe. Anybody else, has anybody made them ever before or had them on Good Friday? Nope.
I've never had one.
Is anybody still there?
Yeah, I'm
Everybody
here,
out there? Everybody knew?
but I've never had one.
No, I know. I've heard about it for a long time. That's why I thought it'd be really interesting to have Lori teach us how to make them, and talk a little bit about yeast and a lot of good things we need to know in the same process.
Yeah, I have trouble with yeast, getting this to work. I've been married almost 44 years and I've never been able to successfully do a yeast roll.
Maybe that'll be-
Oh, to come to one of our classes.
Well, I was
Yes.
fortunate that I grew up, my mother made these when I was younger. So I grew up eating the hot cross buns. So this was actually her recipe. And then a lot of her recipes I've kind of changed a little bit just to kind of update them and make them easier and things like that as well. So.
Hey, Lori, somebody asked if they could soak their raisins in rum before
Or bourbon.
Or bourbon.
I'm a huge bourbon fan. So yeah, definitely. I would definitely, if you want to add just that hint of flavor to it, you could actually, even another really cool one would be some triple sec. So you'd get that orange note with the currants or raisins as well. So definitely, you would want to make sure that you drain them before you put them in, just because we don't want that extra liquid. Also, one of the other historical things about the hot cross buns as well was the spices that are used in it were hinted to be reminiscent of the embalming spices that were used for Jesus as well. So that's another point for the hot cross buns that we've also read about.
Yep.
All right, so we're gonna keep going through the ingredient list. We've got our butter. So this is an important topic to talk about, butter. I always use unsalted butter in all of my baking. The reason that I do is because the different brands are going to have different amounts of salt in them. And so as a baker, I want to be able to control the amount of salt in my recipe. And so I will always use unsalted butter, and then I will decide how much salt I want in my recipe. The times that I vary from using the salted butter are when I have my mother to dinner, because she insists on salted butter. And also, like if I'm griddling my English muffins, when I make my pancakes, I will take that butter and slather it on the griddle just because I want that salt, that hint of saltiness on my tongue. So just a few hints about butter. Also, interestingly enough, salted butter actually will keep longer. So I prefer to buy the unsalted butter because I know it's fresher because the stores can't keep it as long. So another interesting point is that salt is used as a preservative in butter. So then we have our cinnamon, and we've discussed adding different spices. If you don't like cinnamon, you could leave it out. You could again use nutmeg, cardamom, just whatever spice you like, really.
Someone says, what should we set our ovens on?
We are actually not going to turn our ovens on yet because some of us might be proofing in the oven, and also because there's going to be a second rise. So kind of looking out as to the rest of this recipe, these are going to rise for about a half an hour to 45 minutes until they're doubled. The dough is doubled. Then we're going to shape them, and we're either going to go ahead and put those in the refrigerator covered overnight. And a couple of reasons why we want to do this. One, because we don't want to get up in the morning on Easter morning and prepare all these ingredients and wait, several hours before our buns are ready. Or two, because overnighting your dough actually increases flavor development and it is healthier. So many of the breads that we do here at the restaurant, we keep overnight in the refrigerator. All of our sourdoughs are definitely overnighted. We don't use any, in many of the recipes, we don't use commercial yeast in those. So when it rests overnight in the refrigerator, there is some enzymatic activity that's going on there, and it's actually pre-digesting that gluten. So it is actually, healthier. That's why some people that don't tolerate gluten breads can sometimes eat sourdough, is because it is actually pre-digested. And then the other reason is because it's really cool to just wake up in the morning, let them raise, and then put them in the oven while you're enjoying your family or doing things. So if you were to want to bake those tonight, I think your fingers. If you were to want to bake those tonight, we're actually going to set it at 375, but it'll probably be a good another hour before you would bake these. So, that's your call if you want to go ahead and set your oven to that. So we're going to keep going through the ingredients, and then, as we get further into shaping and things like that, we'll talk more about the baking process. So again, we talked about yeast. There's several different types of yeast, and I do know a lot of people struggle with yeast. The main issue is having the proper temperature. And so, we find that you can kill your yeast by having the temperature too hot in your water or the liquids that go into it. Again, the other thing that we discussed is that if everything is too cold and you have this thick pasty dough and your yeast is insulated, then it's not going to proof. Or if it did, it's going to take a really long time. And so a lot of times as bakers, we talk about time and temperature as ingredients. And this is very important because we're able to manipulate the way we handle the dough based on our schedules. So a lot of people think that sourdough is very difficult, but it's really a matter of managing the time and temperature that you have. So in this particular instance, we've got our dough set at 100 degrees and we're rising it for half an hour. If I knew that I had to be somewhere, I had to take my son to basketball or something, and I was going to be gone for, an hour and a half. In this particular instance, we could take that hot crust bun dough, set it somewhere a little more chilly, and it would, have an hour and a half to rise versus that warm half hour. So manipulating the time and temperature of the yeasted dough or a sourdough dough is going to allow you as a baker to have more control over the timing and the schedule and the flavor development of the dough. So in regards to yeast, several different kinds of yeast. We have our instant yeast, which Kenna gave you in your basket. That does not have to be hydrated. You can put it directly in your flour. Again, I prefer, just because I've worked a lot with yeast and I've had instances where it hasn't risen because it was encapsulated in that. So I always like to have a fail safe, and I like to proof it if I can. My focaccia recipe though is added directly to the dry mix, and then I add the water and the sourdough starter to the focaccia. But it's a 5-hour rise. So it's got plenty of time to catch up. So just something to keep in mind if you're using the instant yeast. Same with the quick rise yeast. Your traditional yeast, again, you're gonna wanna proof them. Always a good idea, like if you're not sure of the validity of your yeast, is to make sure, just do a sample to make sure that that yeast will actually rise. Because you don't wanna put all this time and effort into a recipe and then find out that your yeast, is old and doesn't work anymore. There's also something called compressed yeast or fresh yeast. That's more of a baker's yeast. You'll find it like at specialty stores. That's just something totally different to use. And then curiously enough, I do a lot here at the restaurant with sourdough. So sourdough actually is a yeast. It's just a natural yeast. It's not a commercial yeast. And it turns out that that commercial yeast, if it gets into sourdough, it can actually kill your sourdough because it is so active and viable, and sourdough is so slow moving that even one granule will eventually kill that sourdough. So just an interesting conversation of yeast there. Milk, if you were to want to make this recipe vegan, you could definitely substitute like a soy milk, or if you don't do dairy, definitely practice or work on, trying a different milk type there. Sea salt. When we talk about our salt, different kinds of salt that we have, I prefer sea salt in this recipe because that was traditionally what they used. The cooking mix that you have that Kenna gave you in your kit, that we actually make that here at the Millstone. Freshly milled flour and kosher salt. So I'm gonna grab our salt here. So this is our kosher salt, and this is our regular salt, our sea salt. So if you take a look at the difference of granule sizes. So this is really coarse. And then this is really fine. And so I really kind of just use those in different applications. I love the kosher salt in the cookie mix that you have because I like that taste of saltiness that kind of is a pop of saltiness. In this particular recipe, we're using the sea salt because we just want that balanced salt across the board. So, as you progress into baking, that's something really interesting to try is maybe you have a preference of kosher salt versus the sea salt. At home, I have a pink Himalayan salt. I would definitely substitute that. I love the pink Himalayan salts. Lots of different interesting salts. I have one more salt here to show you. If you haven't seen this one, this is Maldon. It is actually sea salt flakes. And we use this on top of our rosemary focaccia. And so then this one is actually even coarser. And so what we get on top of our focaccia is this great salty flakes. So just a fun conversation about salt there for you.
If you haven't sprinkled salt on top of your chocolate chip cookies, you're missing.
And this would be the perfect salt to do that. So this is an amazing salt to just garnish things with. When we make pasta here, we do a pasta class as well. And so when we make pasta here, we do the pesto. And this is amazing sprinkled on top of your pesto as well.
And Lori's also at Farmers Market, so you can purchase more of these at Farmers Market if you want, and different kinds too.
Yeah, we have them here at the cafe as well. So we have a scone mix. So all of my scones are based on that. We have a pancake mix, muffin mix, cookie mix, and then the brownie mix. And the brownie mix is actually rye and soft white wheat. So all of those mixes are made with only freshly milled flour. Super flavorful, fun to use. I do a lot of different testing with recipes. So it's just a great base to make a lot of different fun things. So our donuts here, like our chocolate donuts too, are made with the brownie mix as well. So that's kind of fun. We're gonna go ahead and mix up our icing. So now that you guys have had a little time to relax, we're gonna actually go take a peek at our dough to see what it's looking like. All right, so it is rising. We're gonna open it up and we're gonna take a little poke. So we're gonna press the dough down. Well, it helps if you have a wet finger, so we'll try that again. I got a little butter. And it just kind of stays down. It doesn't really do much of anything, so it needs a little more time. So we're gonna cover it back up. And then we're gonna mix up our icing while it gets a little more time. Do you know how long it's been rising? All right, so for our icing, we've got 1 cup of powdered sugar, a teaspoon of vanilla, a pinch of sea salt, and a 1/4 cup of heavy cream. And our
Wait,
direction,
Can I ask a real quick question? If
Yep.
I'm gonna bake them till tomorrow,
Uh-huh.
they make their icing now and will it hold until tomorrow?
oh, definitely. So at the cafe here, I use a very similar icing. I mean, it's very, very similar for all of our danishes. And so what I'll do is I'll mix up a big batch of icing and I'll put it in my piping bag and I'll just hold it and I just use it like every day. So it keeps incredibly well. This one, it might be a little thicker, so it might be a little harder to squeeze. You might have to like set it out to warm up a little bit. So our directions say to make the icing, place the powdered sugar in a bowl, add the salt, vanilla, and cream, and stir to the desired consistency. And basically what that means is we're looking for, again, if you're measuring the powdered sugar and it, might be clumpy or different things, you kind of have to figure out what the consistency is that you want. So we're going to do that, and then you can see, if you like the consistency that we have. So I already measured my 1 cup of powdered sugar out because it was the last cup of powdered sugar here at the restaurant. So I needed to make sure I had enough for the class. So we have our 1 cup of powdered sugar, and I will let you guys get your bowl and measure your powdered sugar out. But same idea with your powdered sugar. If you need to sift it prior to measuring it, if it's been sitting around for a while, you probably want to sift it because it gets a little clumpy. So same scoop method, and then you're gonna use your knife to slice it off to level it out, and then we're gonna put our 1 cup in the bowl. And then here I have some homemade vanilla. So I love vanilla.
How do you make it?
So what we've got is some vanilla beans, and then I actually just this time I used vodka. A lot of times I'll use bourbon. So the bourbon vanilla beans that you hear about, they aren't actually like beans that have been in bourbon. They're actually a type of vanilla bean. So a bourbon vanilla bean is actually a type of vanilla bean. But basically you let it soak for as long as you have. I burn through it very quickly so it doesn't sit quite as long as I would like. And then you kind of shake it up a little bit and you get this great, so this was originally, a clear vodka color. So we are going to use a pinch of salt. And the reason we're putting salt in this is because salt is a flavor balancer. You always want to taste everything you have and make sure that it tastes good to you. But salt really kind of brings all of those flavors together. And then we're going to do a teaspoon of vanilla. And then a 1/4 cup of cream. So I got to find a clean measuring cup. It's a good thing I have a lot of measuring cups in this place. You guys get a behind the scenes peek at the cafe. So we got a 1/4 cup of cream. And then we're going to dump that in. And then stir it all together. And what we're looking for on this particular one is a little bit of a heavier icing. So the icing that I use on my cheese crowns and things is a little bit thinner, and it tends to kind of melt away and glaze it. But we're really kind of looking for a heavier icing that will stay when we make that cross.
And Lori, this icing's kind of like anything else you could add different kind of flavoring for like.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. So if you did that rum raisin, you could put a little rum in here as well, just to, to have a good flavor marriage of the icing along with the rolls.
So this is a nice consistency. So that's about what we're looking for. And then Kenna gave you guys a piping bag. And I love these little piping bags. And a real easy way to fill it if you're by yourself is you're gonna take the top down. And this is important because we wanna like keep the top of it clean. And then I will put it like in a container, like a 4-cup container or measuring cup. And then we're gonna put our icing in there. And then if you're not baking until tomorrow morning, then I would just put the icing in the refrigerator overnight because it does have that cream in there. And then I usually just grab the spatula with the piping bag and get it all cleaned off. So you got cleaner dishes there. And now you can take your top up and you got a great clean top. So as you're piping, let me grab a rubber band real quick. So if you've always had trouble with the piping bags and the icing coming out the top, or you're working with children, or you're just messy, if you get a rubber band, let me see if I can find a small one here. Huh? Oh. Here. You see a small one? Okay. So what you can do then is, again, I can use my dough scraper here and kind of push down, or you can just kind of pull it this way, or somebody in my last class that said they take it and pull it against the countertop. So we're going to get all that icing down, and then I twist to get a, a nice, just tight, all the icing. And then if you wrap the rubber band around it, your icing is not going to come out of the top. And so this is real nice to give to a younger chef so that they feel more comfortable using a piping bag. Someone says, is it okay if the buns stay in the fridge to bake tomorrow morning?
Yep. Yeah, and we're definitely going to talk about how to put the hot cross buns in the refrigerator so that you can bake them tomorrow morning. And then we'll talk about the baking process as well. Because we're actually going to put these in the refrigerator as well. I'm not going to bake mine tonight, but you're welcome to bake them tonight. So we're going to set this aside. Anybody have any questions on icing?
The question is, how long will they last in the refrigerator until you have to pull them out and proof them again?
It's a good question because they have a lot of yeast in them. So I would say probably not more than maybe 2 days. I wouldn't let them go much longer than that.
So they'll be good to bake tonight.
So some of them
will be good to bake tonight or tomorrow night.
Yeah. So definitely, if you want to bake them tomorrow night, you can bake them tomorrow night. I'm going to show you. This is the potato dough that I use for all of our cinnamon rolls, our cheese crowns. What else do we use it for? I'm sure we use it for a bunch of different things. It's a class I teach too. But so I made this dough yesterday, and it's another one of my no-knead doughs. But you can see I'm just storing it in the refrigerator, and it's just because it's cold, the yeast is going dormant. And so it's going to be the same thing when we put those hot cross buns in the refrigerator, is they're going to go dormant overnight, and they're not going to continue to rise. The yeast will eventually start to eat itself and eat everything around it, and then it starts getting real gassy. So you probably don't want to wait any more than 2 days, because then it's just going to have an off flavor that you really don't like.
Yeah, I think people are concerned because some of them work tomorrow morning. They want
Oh, definitely. Oh, definitely. No, they can definitely bake it when they get home tomorrow night.
Did they bake it on Easter?
If you wanted to bake it on Easter, you'd probably need to make them again because Easter's still pretty far away.
You can make them for Good Friday.
Yeah. So what is today?
Today's
So, yeah,
Wednesday.
you can bake them on Good Friday.
I don't have a pastry bag. What do I use?
If you don't have a pastry bag, then you could use a Ziploc bag. Those work very well. And then just clip the tip off of the Ziploc bag. And that way you've got a storage unit as well.
Did I forget a pastry bag in somebody's? If so, I'm sorry.
So any other questions on icing? All right, I'm gonna pull the dough out. We're gonna take a look at it again.
I think my icing might be too runny. How do I know?
Yeah,
if it is?
And so if it's too runny, then you're just gonna add a little more powdered sugar to it, so it's a little thicker.
Okay.
All right, so we're gonna take a look at our dough. And
Can you
actually-
freeze the dough?
You can, yes. So I would freeze it like at this point. Or actually, I would probably go ahead and shape the rolls and then freeze it. And so what we do with the cinnamon, with the dough that I showed you in the refrigerator, is I actually make the cinnamon rolls and I make the cheese crowns and I shape everything. And then I put it in their freezer. And then when I'm ready to bake, I'll let it thaw overnight. So if you wanted to freeze these hot cross buns, I would shape them, cover them very well, put them in the freezer. And then the night before you wanted to bake them, you're gonna let them thaw out in the refrigerator. And then you'd bake them the following morning. So if we check out our dough here, it looks like it's doubled well. When we're touching it, it's got a little bit of give to it, but it's not, bouncing back all the way. So if you guys want to pull your dough out and check it out and see, if it looks like it's risen, if it still looks totally flat, then you may have an issue, but it should look about like this.
I'm trying to look at people's dough. Give me a thumbs up if you think it looks good. Oh, Meredith, I see yours. Looks good.
Yeah, or you can even show it to, I was gonna say you can show it to Kenna and see.
Carol, I see yours. That looks good. Margaret, I saw yours. I'm assuming everybody I can't see theirs looks just as good.
Yeah, everyone looks real thick.
There,
Awesome.
yeah, looks good.
All right, so we're gonna go ahead and shape it, and I'm gonna shape it, and then I want you guys to shape it after I shape it, just so you can get a really good look at what I'm doing. So we're gonna give you time to shape it, but I want to show you first, because I have a lot of students that are like so excited they just jump in and try to do it at the same time, and so they don't get like the full tutorial effect of it all. So what we're gonna do is if you haven't already, we're gonna get our baking dish. I like my glass baking dish because I think it might have been a wedding gift or it's just really old, and so I love it. And then you could butter it if you wanted to. I end up just using a little bit of nonstick spray. And then we're gonna get some flour. You still have your avocado. So my big scoop here. And then we're gonna dust the surface we're gonna work on it. So when you dust, what you're doing is you're making a big distribution of flour up kind of high. If you do it lower, it might tend to clump a little bit more. But what I'm looking for is just a nice even distribution, because we want, and maybe just a little bit heavier because this is a stickier dough. I typically work on my stainless steel table, but I'm showing you on the nice blue one here today. So
Those of you that's taken a class before and got the rolling pin and had that mat in it, you could do it on that mat. That's a really
definitely a mat. That Silpat mat would be awesome.
Yeah.
So the dough scraper we were talking about, the rounded edge is for your bowl, and then the flat edge is to like cut things. And so I really like these. You can get them on Amazon. I can get them at the restaurant store, so I have like tons of them. But I think they sell them on Amazon for like $4. But like they're really an invaluable kitchen tool. I don't know if you can find them at a local you can probably find them at like Sur La Table or maybe King Arthur, some other baking stores as well. So what we're doing is we're going to use our dough scraper to pull it out. It's going to come out super easy because we greased it. So again, I'm going to demo for you, and then we'll just kind of hang while everybody shapes it. So at the bakery, it's really important that everybody gets the same size of roll. And so when I do the recipe development on this, I take the total weight of the dough and I divide it by the number of pieces. And so I'm looking for 12 pieces. So here is where my scale is going to be super important. So if you're not like a meticulous baker and you like I don't eyeball things very well. And so if I try and cut this into 12 pieces, I'm going to have one piece that's huge and one piece that's little, just because I can't eyeball things. So I tend to use my scale. So if you have a scale, I would encourage you to use it. It's going to be about 100 grams. If you don't, what we're going to do is we're going to cut it in half. And then we're going to cut it in quarters. And you guys will see how horrible my eyeballing skills are here. And then we're gonna cut those into thirds. So what we're looking for is 12 equal pieces. And that would actually make a really cool picture. And like, I love like taking pictures. If you guys go to my Instagram feed or my Facebook feed, I love taking pictures of food just because like food's my life and it's like so beautiful. Makes me want to cry. So we have almost 12 equal pieces, but the really cool part is if we had our scale and we throw that guy on, he's 70 grams. And then if we throw this guy on, he is 114. See, I told you guys, my skills are just not all that good on eyeballing. And so what I do at the restaurant is I will actually like weigh out my pieces. So I took him off, a piece off of him, and now I've got 90 grams here. So I'm gonna go through on all of these and make sure they're roughly 100 grams. And so again, you know, if you're at home and you don't have a scale, then you can just divide it into 12 and then eyeball it the best you can. But when, you know, when people
I have
don't
a
hear.
question. Can I ask a question, please?
Uh-huh.
Our dosing's wet. We did
It is
exactly,
very- Yeah, it's a wet dough.
should we mix
And that's-
some flour to get it together? Hold it together?
No, the goal here is to actually try and work with what you have, because
Okay.
if you move deftly, and this is the kind of the same thing with what we learn in sourdough, is that it is a wet dough. What might help you is to wet your hands a little bit to make it easier to work with, or just put a little bit of flour. But what I do find bakers, what happens is if they keep adding flour to it, that's when your product will get really dense and heavy. And so you've seen the sprinkling of flour that we have. The goal is just to work quickly. So hopefully, you know, it's got a lot of butter and stuff in it, so you should be able to touch it without it really sticking to your hands. And if it is, wet those hands just a little bit. So a couple different ways to shape the rolls. One way is to cup your hand and to go around in a circle. You want to find a place that doesn't have a whole lot of flour on it because you want a little bit of traction underneath it. And so you've got a circle there. And this one, it is a sticky dough. So you know, if you find it sticking to the, you know, to wherever you're working, then you may want to just move it around a little bit. I was teaching Joy how to do this yesterday, and her hand's a little flatter. If there's flour on the bottom, it's not gonna have that tension either as well. So what we're looking for is tension. So what I find is if you kind of cup that hand and let it roll around like a ball, and you just keep rolling until it turns into a ball. And we're hoping that like most of the, you know, that seam side's kind of down. And so we're gonna put them in our pan. So we're gonna do 4 by 3 in our pan. So we're gonna do the other technique. All right, so one more time on this. Like I said, you know, if you've got this flour on there, it's not gonna have the tension. So we're gonna kind of try and make it into a ball to begin with. Cup the hand. Can you get a close up on that? Mm-hmm. And so we're going around, and if you go quicker, it really works better. I worked for this one chef, and he made Sally Lunn rolls, and he could do it with 2 hands, but I'm not that coordinated. So we're gonna put that in there. Okay, so another way, if you think, man, I just can't do that. Another way is you take that floury part, and you're gonna fold it down, and then you're gonna fold this part on top of it, and then this part, and you're gonna just keep folding down, and then you got all this pinched in the center, but it looks like a roll. And that pinched part's fine because we're gonna put it in our thing and then our pan, and then when it bakes, nobody's gonna know that it.
That one's a whole lot easier for unexperienced rollers.
Definitely, definitely, I totally agree, and that's why I'm showing you both methods. Is that that way we can get some practice on on shaping, and you can kind of play around too and see what you like. The reason I like this particular method is just so darn fun when you figure it out. It's just cool.
She makes it look easy.
Yeah, it is. But it's fun once you get it. But my mother did teach me this way, and we do rolls, rolls at home with yeast dough. So again, you're just pulling that top down. So what you're trying to do is create some tension. So you don't want to just throw this in there because you want the tension on the outside of that roll. It's very much like shaping sourdough as well, is when you have that tension, then it allows it to like bloom open. And then we get what's called oven spring, and it grows. But if you just stuck this in there you know, you don't have that tension and it just kind of like just sits there. All right, so I'm gonna let you guys go and shape yours.
I'm gonna
while I
watch.
finish-
I'm anxious
while
to
I-
watch you guys.
What'd she say?
I don't
I said
So
I'm
while I
anxious to watch them.
know.
Yeah, so while I finish shaping mine, you guys get to shape yours. And then we're gonna talk about baking and overnighting and things like that.
That method right there is the easiest, just letting you know.
It is the easiest,
I
yeah.
don't got the roll down.
No, it takes time. I don't have the two-handed roll down.
I couldn't figure it out.
You had a good try.
Yeah.
And then when I have this like here, I'm still kind of shaping it a little bit, kind of trying to tuck that under and still create a little more tension so it looks nice. Because what we're trying to do is have a nice uniform surface here, because when it bakes, we don't want all these cracks and nooks and crannies, and we want a nice pretty roll. All right, so Joy's going to show you what they look like in the pan. So we've got 4 by 3. And so, you know, if you didn't have a 9 by 13 pan, you could stick 3 in one loaf pan and 3 in another. You could put them on a cookie sheet or a baking sheet. So like if you wanted to, you know, if you don't have a 9 by 13, put them on a baking sheet, cover them up. So one of the things about baking is you can get a little creative with you know, with how you're doing things. You have to use the tools that you have, but the more you bake, you will find that, you know, you have to have good tools because it makes it a lot easier when you have good tools. So I'm going to cover these up. And we want to make sure we want to make sure either way that they're covered well. So regardless of whether we're baking them tonight or we're going to bake them tomorrow or on Good Friday, we want to make sure that they are covered very well.
Bethany, that looks good. I watched to make that one.
What else can you cover it with?
Meredith, how are yours doing?
Is that a question?
Good.
So if you wanted to cover it with something else, if you are baking them tonight, we've always covered them with a damp kitchen towel. But if you're putting them in the refrigerator, you really want a good seal on there because you don't want them to dry out in the refrigerator. So we do want to cover them tightly. So like plastic wrap's my preference. I'm not sure beyond that what I would suggest. So I guess kind of let me know when everybody's done shaping.
Yeah.
I don't want to disturb them while they're shaping.
Some individuals might have 9 by 13 pans that have lids that go with them.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, if you have a lid, that's a great option. Yeah, because I do have some metal ones. It's not.
How do you put the cross in and when?
We're gonna get. Oh, are you gonna put the cross on it yet, or after it rises the second?
No. So I don't. Do you want to hold off a few minutes while they're finishing shaping them?
That was a question.
Yeah.
I don't want to answer a bunch of questions while they're still shaping. Is my concern.
Yeah, we'll get to that. How's that, Pamela?
Yeah, so I want to wait. So like if they're concentrating on shaping, then we can concentrate on the rest of the process.
Another person asked if foil could be used.
Yeah, you could use foil to cover it. It just doesn't have as tight a seal. So you know, if you didn't have something tighter, then foil would definitely work.
You just want to try to seal it really good, no matter what you're using.
Yeah, that's the bottom line. Is it just needs to be sealed. Because we don't want air. What'll happen is if it's not sealed well, and I deal with this like when I make bagels and things in my refrigerator, is if I don't actually like throw plastic wrap over top of them, there are just these air gaps in these lids. I've got some great lids that go on the baking sheet. So I mean they're nice lids. But there's just a gap that gets in them and then they'll dry out. So I really to err on the side of caution after I've done all this work, I typically just make sure they're really well sealed.
I see some good shaping going on from those that I can see. And I
I
know,
don't know what happened to my video. I can hear you all, but I can't see you. This is Marcia.
sorry, March, I saw you a second ago.
I don't know what happened, but I've already got mine in my pan shaped and covered.
Awesome.
Good, good.
Kenna was telling me too that this is going to be on YouTube, so you can go back and actually rewatch this as well if you need, and zoom in on the shaping or put it in slow. I know, I think YouTube's got this, I do macrame, and so YouTube has this triple slow, so I can watch their hands on the macrame. So the same thing, if you wanted to try that hand shaping, you could, triple slow it on YouTube and watch and see about that.
Yep. I'll send everybody the link after I get it all uploaded so you can rewatch. And I know some of them are just watching tonight, and some of them will maybe bake closer to Easter or some other time.
Yeah.
They can watch as they make too.
And I will email Kenna the grams. So those of you that want to use your kitchen scale and use grams, because typically here in the cafe, I use grams for everything.
I think that was in the original recipe you sent me too. So I think
It was. Yeah, I decided to do it, the traditional way, just because a lot of people don't have a scale. So
yeah.
Well, in the recipe I have, there's not grams, and it's Lori's fault that I now use grams. So if someone would tell me that, I would be glad to cook this next time with grams.
Yeah,
we
I
got the
will
gram
make
recipe.
sure. I will make sure everybody gets it that way too, because I
Okay.
think that.
You can buy a great scale for less than $15. I can't remember what it was exactly. It was under $15 at Costco.
Yep. Very true. I mean, they're really reasonable. Yes.
All right, so are we fired up on shaping that we want to talk about how to store and bake and the next steps in this?
How we doing? I see some people still shaping.
Okay.
Can you concentrate while she moves on, or do you want her to hang tight for a second?
I'm good.
Okay,
Move on.
move on. That was Joe, I think, because I saw Joe still shaping.
I'm still shaping.
Yeah.
There's a lot of shaping. 12 will take a little bit of time.
Oh, Tanya looks like she has the hand roll down. How you doing, Tanya? Good. I got a thumbs up from her. Cool.
I've seen everyone.
Yes, good. Help in the kitchen, helping them form their little balls. That was Brianna.
I needed that.
I think they're okay, Lori, if we want to move on.
Okay. So at this point, if you want to bake them tonight, what you're going to do is you're going to find that warm place again, and you're going to set them in there for probably another half hour to 45 minutes until they've doubled again. So they're going to get all happy and poofy. If you are putting them in the refrigerator tonight, or putting them in the refrigerator to bake tomorrow or on Good Friday, you want to make sure they're totally sealed and find a nice cold spot and put them in the refrigerator. And so then I'm going to pretend like these have doubled, and this is our next step then. So in regards to like the cross and the egg wash and all those things, again, to reiterate what we're doing is, if you're baking them tonight, you're going to put this in a warm spot for half an hour to 45 minutes, covered. If you are baking them tomorrow or the day after, then you're just going to put them straight in the refrigerator. And then when you are ready to bake them, you will pull them out and you're going to let them double. So it's going to take a little bit longer, probably an hour. So you want them to be all nice and light and poofy. Poofy is a technical term. So we're going to pretend like these have doubled, and I'm going to show you the next steps. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to make our egg wash to go on top of them. So we're going to separate our egg. A couple of different ways you can do it. I prefer like the shell to shell method, but you can also just hold out your hand and let it run through your fingers. And so then on rare occasions, if you're not that skilled with separating eggs, you're going to get a little shell in there. Now, the really cool part about the eggshell is it actually attracts that shell
My husband and I have been married for 30 something years, and he just saw me teaching class and tell people this, and he thought it was like the coolest trick ever. So you can actually take your shell and dip it in there, and it'll actually magnetically attract to that other shell. So just a cool trick for you. And then we're gonna add about a teaspoon of water to this. So just a little bit of water just to loosen it up some. So just a little bit. And then we're gonna whisk it up. What we're trying to do is incorporate the egg white with the water. So get it all frothy and mixed up real well. And I'm using my little parchment here to keep it off the table. And then we're gonna take our scissors, or if you don't have scissors, you could use a knife, and we're gonna snip the cross in them. And again, these have risen, not these particular ones, but yours will have risen at this point. So we're gonna snip a cross in the top. And there are some people like that just take flour and water and make a little paste and make a cross, but I'm like not a fan of that because like I think it tastes like pasty flour then. So we've got our little cross in there. And so again, these have risen. And then we're gonna take our egg wash, or egg whitewash. And the reason we're doing this is because we want a nice glossy top to it. So if you look at the picture here, they're all like shiny. So this egg wash is gonna give them that shine. All right, so then I'm gonna pretend like I've brushed them all. And then we're gonna put them in our oven. And we're
Uh-oh.
Okay.
Lori, I
We're
think,
gonna-
yeah, sorry.
We fixed it.
Thank you.
So we're gonna put those in our oven, and then we're gonna bake them for 15 to 20 minutes, but I baked some yesterday and they took 25. So again, the another reason to have that digital thermometer is because if you test that dough, it should register 190. So one of the last things you want to do is serve your guests or serve your friends or family like half raw dough. So you definitely want to make sure that the bottoms are all brown. So if we take a look here, you know, we've got nice brown bottoms, nice brown on top. But as a safety measure, if you measure it, you want it to go to about 190. So after between 15 and 25 minutes, we're gonna pull them out of the oven.
Oh, just like the kitchen.
I know. I'm so excited. So excited to do that. So here's what we want them to look like. You see our little crosses here on top. And then, you know, if we were to, let's see if they'll come out. So you see the bottom's all brown. And then, you know, they break apart just like they should. And I told you guys I put cranberries in mine. You see the structure of the rolls, nice and light. So when these come out of the oven, we're gonna let them cool, mostly cool, because if you put this icing on them when they're still warm, the icing is just gonna run all over the place. So we're gonna snip the end off. And my icing actually looks like it could be a little thicker. So those of you that like had the icing and you thought it was kind of thin, it looks a little thin. So I'm gonna actually show you how to fix it. You see, even professional chefs have issues. I had several today. I had the Fort Thomas market today, and things did not go my way some today. It was one of those days. I had to throw out four things of English muffins, like 4 trays, because I didn't put enough water in it. So like, you know, things happen in a professional bakery as well. And you know what? I don't even have any more powdered sugar to it.
Should.
Here we go. So we've got some powdered sugar here. So we're gonna thicken it up a little bit. And so this is how, like, if you're at home and you find that it's, you know, it's just not like the right consistency, because that is just definitely, I'm glad I'm finding this out before you guys start piping your crosses. So if your icing looked a little thin like mine, I would definitely suggest pulling it out of the bag and thickening it up some. Because otherwise it's just gonna end up running all over your crosses. And so you basically just want to add enough powdered sugar that it looks like it's maybe like another quarter of a cup. So we want it to be a little thicker.
Yep.
So Ken, if you want, I can resend that, like the
Oh, it's
icing
okay.
part.
They can, I'm sure they're taking notes. I don't think they had the temperature that they come out at either. So hopefully you guys wrote down if you had a temperature and you took it. I will tell
All
you,
right, so we
never taken
see this is
temperature.
a little thicker.
Yeah.
And now we know it's not gonna run all over. So same thing, we're gonna refill our bag.
Yeah. You can also do the same thing Lori's doing by putting it over the edge of a cup.
Mhm.
You know, if that holds it
Or
up.
having somebody hold it for you, but like the biggest thing I find is if you put the top down, it'll just make it so much cleaner for you.
Yeah.
So you don't end up with icing all over your hands.
So Lori, if they made the icing tonight and it's in the refrigerator, it will be a little firmer if they don't get it to.
I think I did the recipe wrong on it though. It's still gonna end up running like this. And
Okay.
so I don't want you guys to ruin your beautiful artwork. So I would definitely pull it out of whatever you did and redo it.
Yeah.
Try again.
Some of them are doing it now.
Yeah, see, doesn't that look a lot better?
Yep.
So this is what we're trying to get. And so you want to wait till those rolls cool well enough that the icing doesn't melt all over them, because you want those crosses to stay. And so a lot of times too, you can take and push down that icing that's crawled up and then retwist it. So you have leverage is what you're looking for. So a couple interesting things that I learned in chef school. One is mise en place, and that's what we talked about at the beginning of class, is having everything. So mise en place is French for everything in its place. And so that's what we talked about here, is having everything organized and set so that you're not having to run all over the kitchen, having everything measured out and stuff so that like if you get a phone call, you can remember, you know, if you put salt in it. And then the other interesting thing that I learned was, and I actually honestly learned this in chef school, was that if something doesn't turn out like you thought it should, then you just change the name. And so most of the time that works really well. And I tried it with English muffins this morning, but it didn't work. So, you know, sometimes it just is a flop, but most of the time that served me very well to just change the name on something. So this is what your hot cross buns are going to look like once you've got your crosses on them. And then, you know, I would serve them, you know, with some salted butter is really nice. If you can serve them warm, you know, all the better. So what other questions do we have? Did we answer the questions about the refrigerating them and then letting them rise and proofing them later?
Yep. And you guys know you're putting the cross on them after they proof the second time.
After they're out of the oven.
Yep.
And so you can see these guys are already, so those of you that are baking tonight, you can see these guys are already rising. I mean, I just stuck them in the oven to show you guys like putting them in the oven, but you know, they're already rising. They look really good, but I'm actually going to throw mine in the refrigerator too. And I'll bake these tomorrow as well.
Yeah.
I have a question. This is Marcia. If you put them in the refrigerator, then when you take them out, do you bring them to room temperature before you start the proofing?
No, you can start proofing them immediately. And so what I'll do tomorrow is I'll throw these in my warm place, and it's going to take probably more than a half an hour because they've got that chill on them. So you just want to carefully watch them, and you're just basically looking for them to double and to rise. So the biggest key is like, you don't want them to go straight from the refrigerator into the oven because they'll take forever to bake. So you do want to get that chill off of them. You want to let them rise and double, and then put them in the oven.
Lori, tell them again the temperature that you tested.
Yeah, the temperature, if you have a thermometer, what you're looking for is 190. And that's pretty much across the board for all baked goods. So if I'm doing my sourdough bread and I'm just not sure if it's baked properly, I'll test it and make sure it's 190. Other thing too on this is you want to look and you want to have some good color. A lot of times bakers are afraid to overbake things. This to me is like a really good color. If you take a look at this one here, they've got color there. Sometimes called a bold bake. And what that means is like that you're actually letting it get brown. But to me, this is much more palatable than if you have something that's underbaked and it's kind of anemic looking. So you do want some nice glossy color on there. And you can kind of see what the egg wash did, how they're a little bit shiny. These guys probably put like an apricot glaze or something on theirs because those are a little shinier. So if you wanted them shinier, then you could, use like a little bit of apricot jelly or something mixed with some water, and that'll give you an even shinier color.
Put sugar on it too.
Other questions?
Everybody good? Now's the time to ask.
And it's from a part that was way back in the beginning. Since I was driving. When you proofed the yeast, you had the warm water and you sprinkled it on top. Did you just leave it floating there or did you stir it in?
No, I stirred it with a fork. And the reason that I prefer a fork over a spoon is that there's more surface area on that fork and it goes between the tines. So then I'll use that. And then I just use that fork again to whisk the eggs as well. Because it's all kind of going to the same place.
I want to make sure because usually if it has yeast, it's a curse for me.
Yeah. Megan said she added a pinch of sugar to it too. I don't know if you caught that.
Oh, we didn't do that.
That feeds the yeast.
Okay, we will next time. Thank you.
Where did you say your shop is located, or do you just sell out of farmers markets?
So we are actually located in Butler, Kentucky. So anybody that's, familiar with the old Butler, we're in the old Nellie's building. So it's been Nellie's, it's been the Liberty Cafe, it's been the Spirit something or other. It's been a lot of different restaurants. And so we actually gutted it and redid it. We also sell a lot of our baked products at the Fort Thomas Farmers Market on Wednesdays from 3 to 6. And then we're going to be at Pendleton County Farmers Market. My husband will spearhead that. He's very social. So if you come in, he's the face you'll see out there. I always hide in the kitchen. So, and he makes all the soups. And so it's a really good team, excited to have my husband and my daughter working with me. Couldn't be more blessed. So, so we'll be at the farmers market. I think it starts the 1st of May. So we do sell at the restaurant. We are open from 7 to 2. And we have all of our mixes here. My husband roasts coffee, so we have fresh roasted coffee. We do a lot of the baked goods for breakfast as well as like biscuits and gravy. And then I also have a lot of different classes too. If you go online to KentuckyMillstone.com, we have like a biscuits and gravy class. We have a muffins class with an introduction to baking class, which is similar to this. So we talk a lot about yeast and we make the cinnamon rolls and some of the stuff that we have here at the cafe. And then we have a couple classes on sourdough as well.
It would be a good opportunity for you and your family to go and bake and cook together and learn from Lori. I see lots of pictures on Facebook of some of her classes.
And we do private classes too. So like if you, if you wanted to bake with your family, you could schedule a private class of usually like 8 people. So like they like to come together for a pasta class. We have a great pasta class as well too.
Good team bonding for work employees too. I would. The address to our location is actually on that bag I gave you at the bottom for where their restaurant is. I do know Farmers Market does start the first Saturday in May. I can tell you as of a meeting I had today, for those of you who have little ones on here, we're going to do our first story walk on May 15th, which might be like the 2nd or 3rd Saturday. I don't have my calendar in front of me, but we're going to do that in conjunction with Farmers Market again, and there'll be a food truck there.
Rising.
Salt
Rising.
Yeah. I have to tell Lori that so she can make lots of cookies. I think she sold out of cookies that day.
Oh yeah, the kids like it was a fun day. I think they were all dressed up for Halloween too, though. That was
Yeah.
super-
That was fun. But that's
we
gonna
had-
be May 15th, our first story walk.
So we had a question: have I ever attempted salt rising? So I've attempted it a lot, and I've had some really good success with it, and then I've had some not so good success with it. My daughter Joy makes macarons, so it's kind of the similar thing. It's like it's a very temperamental dough. I've tried it with cornmeal because I can get my hands on fresh cornmeal. I've tried it with red potatoes. I was doing a lot of it and was almost successful with it, but again, it's very temperamental with the time and the temperature and things. And then I opened up the cafe and I got so busy that like I kind of lost the energy to spearhead that particular experiment. But I do love making salt rising breads. Just I haven't really mastered that one yet.
Any other questions?
I do have a question. My dough was really, really a lot more sticky than yours. Is that gonna mess it up?
It could be a matter of flour, and that's one of the reasons why I recommend baking with a scale is because people weigh and measure flour differently. A lot of the times too, though, bakers aren't used to a wetter dough. So a couple of options in that. The one thing you want to avoid is adding too much flour to it. A lot of times, like if we're not sure if we have the proper amount of flour as bakers, we'll put the entire mass on the scale and then weigh it out to see like whether maybe we've messed up and we haven't added the correct amount of flour to it. So it's kind of difficult to tell. I mean, if you want to put your camera down there, we can take a look.